The Bucs have interviewed a top internal candidate for their offensive coordinator job that is among the favorites to land the position. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credential member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, all one word, to get $50 instantly when you play $5. More deep dives into some of the Bucs offensive coordinator candidates. But before we talk about Grant Udinski or Marcus Brady, we're going to talk about an in-house candidate that is among the favorites to land the job, and that is Buccaneers pass game coordinator Josh Grizzard. So as pass game coordinator, obviously Grizzard had a hand in the Bucs aerial attack this season. It saw Baker Mayfield finish with career highs in passing yards, passing touchdowns, and completion percentage. And he did so with Mike Evans and K. Dotton each missing 3 full games, while Chris Godwin missed 10. As I mentioned on yesterday's show, Grizzard is one of 2 candidates that have interviewed for the position that Scott Reynolds of Pewter Report said is likely to land the job alongside Rams pass game coordinator and tight ends coach Nick Caley. And Reynolds said that the Bucs were closing in on their hire, and it appears to be one of the 2 guys coming down between Grizzard and Caley. So who is Josh Grizzard? Because I'm sure before, the last couple of weeks, a lot of you had never even heard of him. So Grizzard got his start in coaching at his alma mater, Yale, in 2012 as a student assistant. Then he was a graduate assistant and quality control coach for Duke from 2013 to 2016. From there, it was right to the big leagues where he became the Miami Dolphins offensive quality control coach from 2017 to 2018, their quality control coach in 2019, then wide receivers coach from 2020 to 2021. Then after the coaching change to Mike McDaniel, he stayed on the staff as the offensive quality control coach from 2022 to 2023. Last year, he joined Liam Coen on the Bucs staff as pass game coordinator. So under Grizzard, Dolphins wide receiver Jalen Waddle broke the NFL record for receptions in 2021 with 104. That is receptions for a rookie. I should specify that. And he still holds the franchise rookie receiving record of 1,015 yards there in Miami. Liam Coen had said that Grizzard was in charge of third downs for the Bucs this past season, while Thad Lewis was in charge of the red zone and Brian McClendon was in charge of the 2-minute offense. Well, Grizzard certainly had success in his arena as the Bucs converted 51.1% of third downs, which was good enough to be the best in the NFL in 2024. There is certainly a danger that Grizzard could leave for Jacksonville if Coen decides to name him the offensive coordinator, though Coen would retain play calling duties. The Jags recently requested permission to interview Bucs offensive line coach Kevin Carberry, who I talked with Evan Klosky about on the show earlier in the week. He said that Kevin Carberry was the most likely coach to leave. Well, Coen wanted him, and the Bucs denied the interview since it was for the same job with the Jags rather than a promotion. In Grizzard's case, though, it would most certainly be for the offensive coordinator job under Coen, which means the Bucs could not block it, and that is certainly something that is within the realm of possibility in the coming days. Grizz has the benefit of being around two very different styles of offense over the last few years between Miami and Tampa under Mike McDaniel and, of course, Liam Coen. McDaniel is a big fan of running two running back sets, while the Bucs, even though they did use the pistol formation on occasion, they were more of a single back team. With players like Bucky Irving and Rachaad White on the roster, you could see a big uptick in 21 personnel looks from a Grizzard-led offense as the Bucs play caller if he were to land that job. But it's also worth noting that Grizzard has spoken about his responsibilities with the Bucs, and part of his job was to look around at all the offenses in the league to find new and different ways to attack defenses and essentially be able to put your players in the best position to succeed. That was something that both Coen and Dave Canales were really good at over the last two seasons, and it's something that's probably intriguing to both Todd Bowles and Jason Light as part of this offensive coordinator search. The other, of course, is continuity. I talked about that last week on the show when we all thought that Coen was staying, and I talked about the importance of continuity and how it's something that is really important but not talked about nearly often enough. But the ability to maintain the same, or at the very least a really similar offense, would be huge for the Bucs. Baker wouldn't have to essentially start from scratch like he has every other season of his career. And then guys like Bucky Irving, Jalen McMillan, Devin Culp, they can build off of what they did last year by hitting the ground running in OTAs, when those start to pick up, rather than having to learn their second offense in as many years in the NFL. Guys like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, if he returns, those guys, they can pick up everything pretty quickly. But we saw the struggles of Jalen McMillan early on in the season before he really got comfortable with the scheme and his responsibilities in the offense. And once he did, now all of a sudden he was a dominant portion of the Bucs passing offense and really took off with those 7 touchdowns down the stretch. And, I think he had, I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, but it's something like, 17 receptions for a first down to go along with the 7 touchdowns. That you would have continuity and growth also among the offensive line. They would already walk in knowing the kind of blocking schemes that the offense is going to use and how they can build off of their success from last season. Guys like Graham Barton, his second year in the NFL, and then hopefully you get Ben Bredeson back. But with how abysmal the Jacksonville offensive line is, Coen could look to try to bring in Ben Bredeson as a free agent and help him get the other offensive linemen up to speed as to what they are going to be doing within this offense. So we're going to continue to talk about the links and the ties between who Coen had last year and who he's going to try to bring with him to Jacksonville to try to get that team off the ground. But all of this means that the Bucs will just essentially be entering year 2 of this offense. It's an offense that was the top 4 in passing, rushing, red zone, third down, and scoring. Of course, there will be some tweaks and a couple of changes and some of Grizzard's own twists on things. So it's not going to be a carbon copy of the offense that they ran last year, but it would be as close as the Bucs could possibly get to running the same offense that they had in 2024, where they found so much success. Grizzard, like Nate Scheelhaus, who I talked about yesterday, only 34 years old. That is some serious youth for the Bucs in a position where they've gotten younger with each new hire over the last 3 years. Grizzard was also someone that was mentioned on NFL Network's The Insiders show as a strong candidate to watch, according to Mike Garafolo. So Grizzard's name is starting to pick up steam in national circles, not just among Tampa media and Buccaneers fans. So a guy that is clearly one of the front runners early on in this process is an in-house candidate, though the way the Bucs phrase things on social media, saying that they've completed their first in-house interview, makes me think that there are going to be other interviews coming up sooner rather than later. Grant Udinski is coming off of a shocking season with the Vikings, and he has gotten some interest from the Bucs. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so that you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll have the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here, and it's 2 shows every day. You got the Madman Tyler Rowland kicking off your morning, and then you can stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. You add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. So make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. The Minnesota Vikings shocked a lot of people in 2024 with the reemergence of Sam Darnold at quarterback. Well, I mean, reemergence or first emergence, I don't know, however you want to phrase it, but the Vikings finished with the second best record in the NFC. So, of course, teams were going to look their way when filling out offensive coaching staffs. Grant Udinski, their assistant offensive coordinator and assistant quarterbacks coach, may never be as hot of a name as he is right now because of all the success that Darnold found when he was essentially left for dead by the NFL world. So, I mean, this was a Minnesota Vikings team that was supposed to start J.J. McCarthy this season, and then he goes down to injury, and the Vikes are stuck in a situation where it's like, well, we got to start Sam Darnold, so now we're probably going to suck, and we're going to end up with another top 10 pick in the draft next year, which, you know, that's really bad for this season, but that can help down the line when we get a player, you know, in the top 10 of the draft. But then they end up making this crazy run that came down to a week 18 game against the Lions to determine the number 1 seed in the NFC. So who is Grant Udinski and what could he do for the Buccaneers? Well, Udinski is a 29-year-old rising star that got his coaching start at Baylor in 2019 as a graduate assistant. From there, it was right to the NFL as a member of the Panthers staff. He went with Matt Rule from Baylor to the Carolina Panthers. He was a coaching assistant from 2020 to 2021 before he was able to get off of that sinking ship and get himself to Minnesota. In 2022, he was hired as the assistant to the head coach and special projects. I'm not sure exactly what special projects is, but being assistant to the head coach has a very Dwight Schrute feel to it. I'm kidding. Of course, the special projects and duties that were mentioned were basically to provide advanced scouting reports on upcoming opponents, as well as being kind of a floater during practices to help with whatever may be needed at the time. That helped him get a feel for all the different positional workouts, as well as a lot of time with all the different position coaches on the staff. So he got a little bit of a taste of everything in that role. And unlike Dwight Schrute, Udinski was not in that job for very long. He had proven himself a valuable commodity and was promoted to assistant quarterbacks coach in 2023 before becoming assistant offensive coordinator and assistant quarterbacks coach in 2024. Like I said, a rising star. There aren't too many of these coaches that go from graduate assistant to assistant offensive coordinator in a span of just 5 years. That is insanely impressive. Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell has said that Udinski's understanding of all the different facets of football is absolutely unbelievable, which is a big reason for his rapid climb up the ranks. After his promotion in 2024, the Star Tribune reported that Udinski's responsibilities included mentoring J.J. McCarthy, post-practice pass rusher or receiver for Sam Darnold, depending on what he wanted to work on, advanced scout and practice lieutenant for offensive coordinator Wes Phillips, right-hand man to quarterbacks coach Josh McCown, and the confidant and protege for head coach Kevin O'Connell, as well as quote-unquote crazy Grant to O'Connell's kids, kind of like that role of the crazy fun uncle that you would see at a typical family gathering. In addition to the Bucs, Udinski has also interviewed with the Houston Texans, the Seattle Seahawks, and the New England Patriots. So he has had 4 interviews for offensive coordinator positions with just 5 years of coaching experience. There are a lot of eyes on this very young coach. Last season, the Vikings finished 12th in total offense, 7th in passing offense, 19th in rushing offense, and 9th in scoring offense. Sam Darnold had a career year, finishing with 4,319 yards. That's nearly 1,300 more than his previous career high. He had 35 touchdowns, 16 more than his previous career high, a 66.2% completion percentage. That's 5% higher than his previous career high, and 12 interceptions. And while that would be the 3rd most total interceptions that he has thrown in a season in his career, this is the only season in his career where he has started an entire season. He started all 17 games for the Minnesota Vikings. So before this, he had never started more than 12. So his average interceptions per start are actually a career best this season at 0.7 interceptions per game. This is one of those coaches where he is going to end up being an offensive coordinator within the next 2 seasons if he isn't one in 2025. And he's going to be a head coach sooner than later. I mentioned on yesterday's show, the head coaches hired over the course of the last 30 years that were 35 years old or younger. Udinski is going to join that list of coaches. It's nearly a foregone conclusion. It's not very often that you have a 28 or 29-year-old that is getting this much buzz to become a coordinator, but there's a reason for that. It's because he is wildly intelligent. He understands all the nuances of the game of football. Otherwise, he would not have been promoted every single year he's been in the building under head coach Kevin O'Connell. Thank goodness for Udinski's sake that they got him away from Matt Rule and his coaching staff. The other thing to kind of note here after talking about these guys the last 2 days is that the Texans and Jaguars have a lot of interest in the same guys that the Bucs have been interviewing. Now, I'm not saying that one of those teams is going to swoop in and steal the Bucs' top choice, because we know the Bucs take things a little slow. They're very, very diligent in their search, but these are some of the coaches that will be a big part of the future of the NFL. And I think in this situation, if the Bucs felt really, really strongly about one candidate over any of the others, they would go ahead and make the move. They're not going to drag this out just for the sake of dragging it out, but they have to be aware, of course, of the fact that Udinski and Shieldhouse and Grizzard are all getting attention from other teams. So it's a very fine line that the Bucs are walking, that they want to make sure that they get the right guy, but they also want to make sure that that right guy doesn't go somewhere else because the Bucs were taking just a little bit too long to make their decision. One last candidate that the Bucs have interviewed as we head back to the West Coast. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Attending NFL playoff games is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together. I remember last year's divisional round in Detroit being one of the loudest environments I have ever been in. David Harrison and I were less than a foot apart. We were having to text each other to have a conversation. My ears were ringing for a few days after that game. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And while I wasn't attending a playoff game this year, I did recently use Game Time Picks to find tickets to an upcoming concert that I'm going to. And browsing through the deals was simple. I found great value for all kinds of seats around the venue. The super deal was especially impressive offering the best value for the event. The app's features like seat views before you buy and all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout made the experience smooth and reliable. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guaranteed always gives me peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wrapping things up here on another offensive coordinator deep dive episode of Locked On Bucs, and we are moving back out to the West Coast. We did 3 West Coast candidates on yesterday's show, all from the Los Angeles Rams. This time, we're talking about the Los Angeles Chargers and Marcus Brady, their pass game coordinator. He is part of Jim Harbaugh's staff, and honestly, I'm not too sure about this guy. 45 years old, that's basically ancient compared to all the other guys that the Bucs have interviewed. I am kidding. I'm closer to this guy's age than most of the other offensive coordinator candidates, but I digress. Brady got his start in coaching following his CFL playing career. He became the Montreal Alouettes wide receivers coach from 2009 to 2011, then was promoted to offensive coordinator in 2012. From there, he became the Toronto Argonauts offensive coordinator from 2013 to 2017 before joining the NFL as a member of the Indianapolis Colts staff. Brady was the Colts assistant quarterbacks coach in 2018, then their quarterbacks coach from 2019 to 2020, then served as their offensive coordinator from 2021 to 2022. From there, he went to the Eagles as an offensive consultant in 2022, a senior offensive assistant in 2023, before joining the Chargers this past season as pass game coordinator. As the offensive coordinator in Indy, it was Brady calling the shots there during Jonathan Taylor's MVP caliber season when he rushed for 1,811 yards and 18 touchdowns. But honestly, Brady never really had a fair shake at the job considering the quarterbacks that he had to deal with. In 2021, it was Carson Wentz. Then in 2022, it was Matt Ryan, Sam Ehlinger, and Nick Foles. And head coach Frank Reich got the axe halfway through the season before being replaced by Jeff Saturday. In 2021, the Colts were 16th in total offense, 26th in passing offense, 2nd in rushing offense, and 9th in scoring. In 2022, they were 27th in total offense, 23rd in passing offense, 23rd in rushing offense, and 31st in scoring offense. Now, with the Chargers as the pass game coordinator, Justin Herbert, who still seems to be the darling of many among the NFL world, had a pretty decent season. So the Chargers finished with the 19th ranked passing offense, averaging 213.5 pass yards per game. Herbert finished with 3,870 yards. That was 9th in the NFL, to go along with his 23 touchdowns, which was good for 12th in the NFL, and just 3 interceptions. That's the number that I love the most. Herbert completed 65.9% of his passes, which was 18th among quarterbacks with at least 300 pass attempts. The only other team I could find that interviewed Marcus Brady was the New England Patriots. So he doesn't seem to be getting a lot of traction in this coaching cycle, but that doesn't mean that he wouldn't be a good fit, especially with the rushing attack that the Bucs should be able to use next season. With all of that said, if I'm going to rank the 6 candidates that I've talked about over the last 2 shows, from my top choice down to the bottom, it would be as follows: Nick Caley, Josh Grizzard, Nate Scheelhaase, Grant Udinski, Marcus Brady, Dave Ragone. For those that didn't hear my breakdown of Caley, Scheelhaase, and Ragone on yesterday's show, go back and check it out. But I think Caley's experience, as well as the idea of that Josh McDaniels, Sean McVay hybrid offense that I talked a lot about on that show, it's just really, really exciting for what this Bucs team already has on the roster. And then, of course, hoping to bring back Chris Godwin to add to what is already on the roster. I think the concepts of merging those two offenses together could make the Buccaneers offense one of the most dangerous that we've seen in the past couple of years. And I don't just mean in Tampa, I mean across the NFL. I love what Grizzard brings and the continuity there if he is the one that ends up being hired. And trust me, if they pass on Kaylee and hire Grizzard, I am not going to be disappointed in the slightest. These two are basically like 1A and 1B. This is a coin flip. I don't really have a lot separating these two from one another, but I do have these two separated from the rest of the field. In third place, you have Shieldhouse. And, you know, if Kaylee and Grizzard are up here, I got Shieldhouse, you know, maybe about right there. I talked about what he's done under McVay, the success that the other coaches that have traveled the same path have had in the NFL. And I think Shieldhouse is going to be a head coach in the not too distant future. So whoever takes the chance on him as an offensive coordinator might be hiring their future head coach in waiting that can take over that team, you know, for the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years or whatever the case may be. The more I learned about all of the responsibilities that Shieldhouse has under McVay, the more intriguing of an option I felt that he was. Again, a very young guy, very intelligent, very nuanced. And I just liked all of those factors about him. And then Udinski, I find him really, really intriguing. His rapid rise is something that I think is worth taking into consideration when you're looking at him for these offensive coordinator jobs. Again, these guys don't typically go from graduate assistant to assistant offensive coordinator in 5 years. So he is going to be someone very, very special for an organization sooner rather than later. And, you know, he and Shieldhouse might be a couple of guys that we look at 6 or 7 years down the road and think, man, the Bucs were this close to being able to get either one of those guys if one of them or both of them becomes like the hot new thing at the head coaching position for a franchise in the NFL. And then Brady and Ragone, they're kind of at the bottom here. Again, if I have Kaylee and Grizzard up here, then I got Shieldhouse here. I probably got Udinski just a little bit below him, and then Brady and Ragone kind of down there at the bottom. I'm not super impressed or intrigued by either guy, and I think the potential of the other 4 candidates that we've talked about is so much higher that I think if Brady or Ragone are the guy for the Bucs, it almost might be a little bit of a letdown. And I don't mean that in the fact that they wouldn't be good or that they wouldn't be able to fulfill the duties of the job, or that all of a sudden, if one of those guys is the hire, that I'm going to come on here and say, well, the offense is going to suck this year. It would just feel kind of anticlimactic. You know, you have all of these exciting young, guys that have studied under some of the best offensive minds that the NFL has to offer. And then, I don't know. Again, I might be a little bit disappointed just because it would feel like a letdown from the aspect of the potential of those other guys. But again, I don't think either of them would be bad at the job. I just would prefer some of the other candidates. And of course, for all we know, the guy that ends up being the offensive coordinator isn't or hasn't even been interviewed yet. That's how the Bucs have kind of operated. Again, shout out to Scott Reynolds and his reporting over there at Pewter Report. He says that from the feeling that he's getting, it's down to Kaylee and Grizzard. We'll see if that turns out to be true. But let me know in the comments section, after hearing about all 6 of these guys, who your top candidates are. You can give me your top 6, give me all 6 of them in order. Give me your top 1, give me your top 3, however you want to do it. But let me know in the comments who you like the best out of these 6. And then, of course, we will be back tomorrow with all the latest surrounding the Buccaneers. Please make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.